Picked Up Her Husband's Brains by S.C. Turnbo. Among the sad scenes and incidents of the Civil War days that occurred in the Buffalo Mountains is an account furnished me by James C. or Jim Guyan. Now, I saw Mr. Guyan at a picnic 1 mile south of the railroad depot at Coweta, Indian Territory on the 4th of August, 1906, where he related it to me. He said, "I am the son of Jesse and Charlotte Shipman Guyan, and I was born in Henry County, Tennessee, December 12th, 1851. My father died in Polk County, Missouri, and lies buried in the Weaver Graveyard 8 miles north of Bolivar. My mother died in Arkansas and is buried on Spring Creek 5 miles northeast of Big Flat. Now, Spring Creek is mostly composed of 5 springs of water and flows into Big Creek, an affluent of Buffalo." Mr. Guyan said his parents moved from Tennessee to Searcy County, Arkansas in 1855 and settled on Big Creek 5 miles above where it runs into Buffalo and 3 miles northeast of Big Flat. He said that he remembers going to school at Big Flat a short term, a year or more after their arrival there. "I boarded with Asa Baker, who sold goods at Big Flat. I cannot call to mind the name of the teacher, but the school was taught in a hewn log house with benches for seats. Among our neighbors who lived on Big Creek on our arrival there were Barry Treat, Jim Bass, Billy Tilley, Andy George, and Advil Horton. Now, Tilley owned an overshot mill which was run by a fine spring of water that ran out of the bluff some 10 or 12 miles east of Burrowville, which now is called Marshall. Mr. Horton was killed on Big Creek during the war, and a scouting party of soldiers killed him on the creek 4 miles above the mouth." In giving an account of the sad incident as mentioned at the commencement of this chapter, Mr. Guyan said, "A man of the name of Murph Henderson lived near us on Big Creek. He was the son of Chris Henderson, who lived several years on Shoal Creek in Taney County, Missouri. One day, while the cruel war was raging, Henderson and his wife, whose name was Sarah, came to our house. Henderson was near 30 years of age. Now, Captain Joe Smith, an old man, was also at our house at the same time Henderson and his wife was. These men were Southern sympathizers. They had not been at our house but a short time before we noticed 30 mounted men charging toward the house. A moment before they reached the yard fence, Henderson, seeing that they wore blue uniforms, darted out of the house and started running across the field. Smith made no effort to escape and remained in the house. Now, part of the horsemen knocked down the fence and pursued Henderson and took him in the upper part of the field and shot him to death. Well, I was just 12 years old then and remember the awful day as only if it was yesterday. I saw them kill Henderson, and the men who remained at the house threatened to kill Smith, but I begged the men not to shoot him, for he was too old and harmless, and that there would be nothing alleged against him except that he held up for the Southern side, and that was not a crime. I thought for a while they were going to kill him in spite of my entreaties not to do so, but finally they went away from the house without hurting Smith, and the 30 men assembled together again and rode away. Henderson's wife ran to the body of her husband first, and when the soldiers left the house, I and the others went where it lay. His head was almost shot to pieces, and the brains were splattered on the ground where the dead body lay. And Sarah Henderson, his wife, picked up all the bits of brains she could find on the ground and those that had oozed out of the bullet holes in the head, which were still on the head, and she wiped them off with her hands and put them in her apron, and then she took them to a hollow stump, which stood a few yards from where the dead man was, and dropped them into it. A new graveyard had been started on our place, and we buried the body of Henderson there. Sarah Henderson was drowned in Big Creek a few months after the death of her man. She was mounted on a horse, or rather riding double, and was riding behind Bob Seipert on a stout horse, and they reached the ford of the creek. They found it was swollen, but Seipert told her they could ford it, and rode into the water, where he soon got in it, and where he was swimming, and the woman was drowned, and so was the horse. Seipert escaped. When the woman's body was recovered from the water, she was buried where her husband received interment. As a compliment for saving his life, Captain Smith paid me evil for good by stealing the best horse we had and fled, which he had done a short while after Henderson was killed.